Welcome to the 7th month of the Stellar Stars block of the month. This month's block is this lovely, pretty little thing called Wandering Foot. It is a classic traditional block. I changed the colors around a little bit for our fabrics to really show off a beautiful gradient of greens. You'll notice we have a traditional classic orange peel applique shape, and we have a diamond applique shape that's tucked under the leaves for a flower petal. And this entire block is done with applique. I'm going to demonstrate in the video today how to do it with the turned edge technique that we also used for the Shadow Blossom accent blocks. If you prefer to use a raw edge technique, then you can absolutely do that. The templates that are included with the pattern can be used for raw edge as well. In this video, I will walk you through preparing all of the fabric to use with the applique foundation. We are going to use the regular weight applique foundation, and how to turn the edges and apply it to your background. For this month's colors, as I just mentioned, are a beautiful gradient of greens. Last month, our Lotus Star block also had greens. These greens are within the same spectrum, but they are different than last month's greens. Then the flower, little flower petal, or the little bud here, we are going to go all the way back to month number 1 to pull out red number 2 and red number 3 to use for this little part here. So in the subscription bundle, you'll receive these 6 greens. The reds you should have. And then the thread bundle includes these 7 here. Let me pull that one out. So you get a really nice selection of greens from an emerald all the way down to a nice chartreuse, which will, when we do some hand embroidery, gives a really beautiful, fun sparkle to the block. I think you'll really enjoy that. For appliquing, I am going to use the Sulky monofilament, which I used also for the Shadow Blossom blocks. If you prefer to color match, you certainly can. I would recommend using an 80 or 100 weight polyester thread. Wonderfill is really a great option, as well as the Soie Surfine. This green that is included in this set is the Surfine, and it would be really nice to use for the darker colors, but unless you wanted to show up on the lighter colors, I would recommend finding a lighter color to use on those. But if you prefer to color match, again, you can use Wonderfill. There's other companies that have 80 and 100 weight polyesters. You can also use other silks. That would work just fine as well. You can also hand applique this. So once we have everything prepared, you can choose to do hand applique, which I did demonstrate in the Shadow Blossom block. So what you'll need for supplies are your fabrics and your applique thread. You'll also need the template, which is included in the pattern, so you'll print 1 copy of the template. You'll need your washable Elmer school glue with the fine glue tip, washable Elmer school glue stick, the purple one, and you're going to need a little bit of liquid stitch, which is a permanent fabric glue. We use this to secure these points here so they don't fray and unravel. You'll also need a bit of the regular weight applique foundation. This block isn't huge. You're going to use less than 1/2 yard. So if you've got some on hand, that is wonderful. If not, you can always find it on my website, and I'll be folding it into layers of 4 so I can cut 4 pieces at a time. So now that we have taken a peek at the block, you have the templates handy. You also know what fabrics to use. Let's go ahead and get started with preparing to make all of our applique pieces. In order to get your fabrics prepared for applique, you just need to give them a light pressing with starch, maybe once, just to press out any creases that might be in your fabrics. We don't want to do too much starching on these because when they are stiff, the edges will be very difficult to turn and keep smooth. So we want to make sure the fabrics stay nice and soft. You'll also prepare your background fabric. We'll talk about that in down the line a little bit. That would need to be starched as well, and that can be 1 to 2 times on each side like we prepare for all of our piecing. So with applique, we're going to get the best results when our applique fabrics are washed a little bit more than our background fabrics are, because all of these fabrics here are hand dyed, and it's always recommended that you do wash hand-dyed fabrics before working with them to get out anything extra that might be lying around. We do our very, very best to test everything, and we test it lots and lots and lots of times. But coming from Arizona and going to someplace more moist, we just never know what can happen. So I do recommend that you wash them. And then your background fabric can be pre-washed or not. What we're going for with the washing or not washing of our applique fabrics is to get our stitches to kind of roll under a little bit. And for example, here is a very old applique piece that I made, I don't even know how long ago, but I used the same technique. You can see how the foundation is nice and soft, and the stitches have kind of tucked and rolled under. So basically what we did here is the applique fabric was washed and dried. So it was washed with hot water, for example, and then dried in the dryer. Then the background fabric was either not washed or was just washed and air dried. So it has less shrinking than the applique fabrics. What that does is once everything is quilted and washed, that will, because these are shrunk at different rates or different levels, so to speak, the background fabric and the backing will shrink up just a little bit more than the applique fabric, and it will help tuck these stitches and roll them down under just a little bit to help hide them, so it looks like it was hand applique. You can see how I love how the foundation gets so soft, and I could have quilted through this if I really wanted to, but that's what we're shooting for with this applique technique. So in order to get that, if you wash the applique fabrics and dry them, and then either don't wash or just wash and air dry your background fabric, they'll be shrunk at different levels, and then it'll help get this effect when it is everything is done and quilted and washed. These fabrics are all prepped and ready to applique. My background fabric, again, we will work with down the line a little bit. So what we'll need first is our template. So you'll print just one copy of your applique templates, and you'll need a bit of the regular weight applique foundation, and I have folded it into fourths. That way I can cut out 4 pieces from one template. At the bottom I've listed how many pieces you need of the foundation. So piece A, you'll need 4, then we need 12 total of these, so if you cut 4 of each from these 3, you'll get 12. So first thing we'll do is rough cut. Please don't do this part right on the line. Save that for cutting out the foundation. That way you don't have to be too exact twice. So just cut all of these out. And this last one. Okay, so these are all ready to work with our foundation. I'm going to go ahead and line up one piece, kind of at the edge here, but I want to make sure that all 4 layers are within the lines of the foundation. I'm sorry, within the lines of the template. I'm going to take a stapler and staple at once at each end. And then I'm going to cut this out. It's much easier, I think, to cut one of these out and then staple again, rather than trying to get my stapler to stretch all the way through there. So to cut this out, we're going to cut right on or cut right to the inside or to the left of this line. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to cut right-handed here. And what that does, getting rid of that line actually makes this piece more accurate, because if you'll imagine when these pieces have the fabric turned around them, the thickness of the fabric will take up that space that we are removing because of the line being there. So if we left the line and then turned around it, or turned around the space that would be the line, or is the line, we would actually be making our pieces a little bit bigger. Most of the time it won't be that big of a deal, but sometimes it can be. So just knowing that if you cut off the line, in this case, your fabric will take up that space and then your piece will be more accurate. But just barely, I'm just skimming right past it. And in some places you can see that the black line is still there. So that is ready, and I'll repeat the same thing for my other two pieces, as well as piece number A, or piece, as well as piece letter A. Okay, my second bee is ready to cut. When you are cutting, in addition to just watching that line, please go as smooth as possible. These edges do need to be as smooth as you can make them, because when you're turning your fabric around those edges, if you have any bumps, wedges, hills, that is going to show up in the fabric once you turn the fabric edge over. So be real careful as you're going around to make it as smooth as possible. Take little cuts as you go. I'm using, these are my favorite scissors to use. They have a nice big cozy handle. I can fit my fingers in them really well. And the blade is short and the point is blunt. So where it stops cutting is actually where it stops cutting, rather than having a point extended and you get a little extra cut just because that point is so fine, and that way I get more control. So the shorter blade gives me more control as I'm cutting to get a more of a smooth cut. Using shears, large scissors for this, is not going to give you the control. So you're going to probably find, if you use those types of scissors, that you'll have to cut all the way back here at the back and kind of go really short cuts in order to have any control at all. I recommend having a good pair of scissors like this that you can have control with to cut things, applique pieces or other pieces like this in your work. I've gotten all of the templates cut out. You can see that there are 4 layers of the foundation with each of the templates. And these templates are the actual size of the applique piece. A common question that I'm asked by new appliqueurs is, why cut this without a seam allowance? Because as quilters, we are used to adding a seam allowance. These applique pieces are cut to size because the seam allowance will be added, or what would be, in this case, a turning allowance, will be added when we apply the applique piece to the coordinating fabric. So the next thing we're going to do is apply those foundation pieces to our applique fabrics. We have 12 total leaves and 4 of our little flower buds or flower petals. Starting with piece number A, or piece letter A, we're going to work with red number 2 and 3 from month number 1. And 2 of these will go with color number 3, and 2 of them will go with color number 2. And that just gives some variation in texture within our block. Now with the greens, there are 6 greens that you can work with. And there are 12 pieces, so most simply we can use 2 of each of these with 1 of each of the colors, giving us 12. If you would rather do a different combination of greens, you're more than welcome to. If you want to use only a few and not a couple of the others, go for it. For this instructions and in the pattern, I am going to show 2 of each greens with our orange peels or our little leaves here. So to get started, I'm going to work with piece A. And you're going to need a scrap piece of paper, just something that you don't care too much about, that you can throw away. A cuticle stick or a pair of tweezers is really helpful. And you'll need your Elmer's washable school glue stick, the purple one. So this is my favorite to use for applique. There are other glue sticks. Line is one. There's a lot, but I like this one best because it dries clear. It's a little tackier, so I get a little more grip when I am turning my edges. I find the Line isn't too tacky, so sometimes when I'm turning the edges, they pop up, and that isn't what I want with applique. It's fine for foundation piecing and other methods or other techniques, but for this, I really like the Elmer's washable, the disappearing purple. So I'm going to peel up, or I'm going to turn up these staples. Helps to keep all of my pieces together so I don't have them all floating around my table and getting lost. So I'll take up one of my pieces and we'll start with that, putting it to our fabrics. Now I do want to talk about right sides and wrong sides. This piece here, as well as all of piece B's, are symmetrical pieces. They have a line of symmetry right down here in the middle. So if I were to fold this over, it's exactly the same, which makes it so there's no right or wrong side of the cut applique piece, because it's not making a right or a left piece where we have to be careful with where applying this piece to the fabric. If I apply it like this or like this, it's going to be the same. Now, in general, when you work with applique pieces like this, this side is always going to be the right side. So if you are working with a non-symmetrical piece, when you have it like this is the back and this is the front, we'll always be gluing the front of our applique foundation piece to the back of your fabric, because then that will again make that the front. So it's right side to wrong side with these. Not to worry too much this time because they are all symmetrical, but for the future, if you really like this technique and you want to use it for some different projects. So we'll go ahead and get our applique foundation and glue, and this is why we have the paper. So I'm going to paint some glue just on these edges here, and then I lift it up with my glue stick and get the applique fabric, and I'm going to put it on just like that and just set it in place. And then I'll repeat that with the second red one, second of that same color. And put it on the fabric here. And you can be fussy if you're using a really lovely print or a color that has some great designs in it. You can certainly be fussy about where you place your applique piece onto your fabric to get a design to show up on the front side. So those are ready, and after I've got that, I'm going to get my iron and heat set that in place. So my iron is nice and hot, no steam, and we're going to heat set that in place. You can flip it over and do it from the other side. Then you can see the glue peeking through, but don't worry, that's only because of the heat. This dries completely dry and clear with no discoloration. So as soon as that cools off and dries, I'll show that to you again. So we'll repeat the same thing with these two for our red number 2 as well. So we had the lighter red number 3 and then also red number 2. So let's take a look at our bees here. We're going to do the same exact thing. And again, I'm going to do 2 of each of these for each green color. 6 green colors and 12 applique pieces. So I'll go ahead and turn up my staples. And then take one here. Okay, I'll paint the glue just like I did on the other. There's just no need to have glue all on the inside too. It's the edges that are most important here. And then I'll get this keeps my fingers clean. And then when you place it on your applique fabric, you can go at an angle like this. You can go up and down. You can go sideways. It's really up to you. Because this is applique, we are going to be securing all of those grain lines regardless of the way that this is positioned. So you don't need to worry about maintaining your grain or trying to figure out which is straight, bias, or cross grain. So I'll do a second one and place it. And now what I'm doing, I want to make sure I have enough space here for my turning allowance. My turning allowance is going to actually be about the width of this cuticle stick. About less than 1/4, but just a smidge more than 1/8, let's say. So it's just about the width of that. That's just my preference. 1/4 is just too much. It makes bulky, overlapping ruffles on the inside, and I don't really enjoy that very much. So I like to have a nice thin allowance there. So I'll press from the front again. You can press from the front and back. And so I have those two all. So these two are all ready to trim, as well as the reds. My preference is to prepare all of the applique pieces like this and then cut everything out. If you want to prepare a couple, cut a couple, you're welcome to. But I would go ahead and next prepare all the rest of the greens, 2 of each of the other greens, and then next we're going to go ahead and cut these out of our fabrics. So when you cut them out of your fabrics, we'll start here with the red. Again, we're going to add that allowance around the outside edge. So when I'm cutting, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. If you